Cobra Kai.
Kidding.
Bonsai, I'm the Cobra Kai Kid, and today I am joined by the supervising sound editor of Cobra Kai, Patrick Hogan. Patrick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very good. Thanks for having me on. Very excited to get a chance to talk all things Cobra Kai.
Yeah, thank you for joining me here. I'm super excited to talk to you. As we talked about a little before we started, the sound department of Cobra Kai and the behind the scenes, the crew doesn't always get highlighted as much because you don't see them on the screen. And I forgot who said this. I heard somewhere like this quote, but basically they said, like, for like the people working on the crew, if you can't tell that we're doing our job, like we did our job.
Yeah.
Meaning like the crew and all their work, like it should be so seamless into the show, like the sound should just blend in so naturally that you don't even notice it because it's just there. You've heard that,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
yeah, and it's very true. What we're selling, it's a story that we're telling, and what we don't want you, the audience, to see is all the behind the scenes work that went into telling that story. We want you to just enjoy the story. And the fact is that because it's make believe, shocker. I don't want to spoil anything, guys. This is pretend.
No.
Joe, I want to get right up to front. Joe, who plays Kyler, is the sweetest guy in real life. He's so nice, and you all think he's this horrible villain, but no, he's a great guy in real life. But that's the point, is to, like you said, do something so seamless that it seems like that's what naturally occurred in the moment. The sounds that we're adding to the show are meant to make you think that you are in that place, in that time, in that reality, and that it's real, so that when something emotional happens, whether it's funny or sad or exciting, that you think it's real and you're not thinking that you're watching, something that's being staged, but that you're right in the middle of it. And that's part of what sound does really well. Sound is kind of the thing that puts you in the middle of it as opposed to watching it from the outside, because the visual is flat, right? You're looking at a flat screen, whether it's an iPad or a giant TV or what have you. And the sound is what kind of comes. We can put, if you have surround sound or speakers that kind of bounce and create surround sound, we can kind of put you in the middle of that environment. And that's what I love about it. And most of the time we're doing things to manipulate your emotions that you don't even know we're doing.
That's a great point that I wanted to bring up, and I'm sure we'll get into that because I'm sure people can watch a show as many times as they want and pay attention to all the sounds, but as someone who works specifically on the sounds, I'm sure you have a lot of stories of things that you've included that people might not catch, and maybe you could bring up and mention to us.
Boy, I should have prepped more and thought specifically about things in Cobra Kai. There are a lot of times where we will add, in the fight scenes, especially when they're in the tournaments, we add a lot of low end sounds that are not realistic at all. But I don't think in the moment you're thinking this is fake. What we're doing is we're telling the emotion of the story. When I guess everybody's watched the show. I can talk about any episode.
yeah, definitely.
At the end of season 4, when Hawk and Robby fight, there's a lot of moments where we're adding all kinds of just heavy low end things just to create the sense that these guys have been fighting now for like 5 or 6 minutes, and they're like, no fight's ever gone this long, in the Miyagi verse, and we're we're doing things to help steer you in the direction that the filmmakers want to go. So in this case, the big three, John, Josh, and Hayden, they know what they want. And what we're doing is we're trying to help tell that story and help push some of that. Even things like the sound of Johnny's car, right? Like Johnny's car, like, always has a muffler that's not quite properly tuned, right? Like it's not a game-changing detail, but it's those little character things. It's done in wardrobe, it's done with the acting choices, it's done with direction, and it's done with sound. His car is, a little janky usually. Now contrast that with Ralph, with Daniel's car. He
Mm,
obviously has a car that his car's really nice. It
mm,
purrs, little details like that oftentimes help. I don't think anybody should be paying attention to those sounds per se, but they should be little details that help fill you in. The neighborhood. It's in the first season, Johnny's apartment, we're hearing people arguing in the other apartments. Thin walls, right? He's down on his luck. He's living in this apartment building. He's not well off. People are arguing in the other buildings, and then when we cut to Daniel, we're hearing birds, and I always joke. I always joke is you can help tell. I can help tell you the how affluent a neighborhood is by the dog barks that I put in. So the bigger the dog, the poorer the neighborhood, and the smaller the dog, the richer the neighborhood. I mean, that's kind of a generalization, but little things like that just kind of help.
yeah.
If you think the neighbor is a well-to-do lady who has a little dog that she carries in her purse versus like someone else has like a Doberman junkyard dog, guard dog. Little things like that go a long way in helping kind of establish the tone and mood for something.
Yeah, well, I'm hearing the dog bark right now, and
I,
it's actually is that your dog?
no, no. I have a dog. She can't bark. She's really old. She can't bark anymore. But I live in a neighborhood. I live in a dog neighborhood. Like
Mm,
I think every other house in this neighborhood has a dog.
that's great. I love dogs, so I bring that up because it's funny because in season 1, episode 1, the first shot of modern day Johnny, it's like, panning up from him lying on his bed, and there's a faint dog barking there,
Yeah,
right?
it's a great way to establish. There's certain sounds and they're cliched, but they're cliched because they work, right? There's certain little clues that will fill you in to where you are. you know um, Shows don't have the time to, you can't spend 2 minutes kind of like on a steady cam going through a neighborhood and showing lots of establishing shots. Like you have to be quick about these things, especially in the TV world. And a little bit of sound can really help solidify the location. You know, when Johnny's training the kids in later seasons in that warehouse that he just kind of takes over, we put a lot of reverb on their voices, so it's big and
Mm.
cavernous and echoing. Little details like that to show that they're in this big empty space. It just kind of helps you get the sense of the world, and you don't have to show a wide shot showing the entire cavernous warehouse. If you just hear their voices with these big echoes on them, you know that they're in a big cavernous warehouse.
Mm, that's a great thing that I actually didn't think about until now. There's so many different locations in the show, and I've done a lot of films myself, and you know anywhere you go, there's a different sound depending on the location. If you're outside, if you're in a small room, if you're in a big room, if you're in a room with a lot of soundproof or an empty room. So how much does the location have an effect on sound and how the characters are talking and the environment
Yeah.
around them?
Well, that's so the sound is divided. On a typical episode of Cobra Kai, we're probably delivering. And remember, so one thing is a lot of people get confused. I'm not in charge of the music, so supervising sound editor. I'm in charge of kind of helping the mixers wade through everything on the stage. So I'm involved in the music as far as knowing what the end goal is, but I'm not prepping the music or delivering the music. That's a separate, because that the music editor is usually tied to with working with the composers, which I don't have the time to do. But just so non-music, I'm usually delivering somewhere in the vicinity of 100 to 140 tracks to the stage,
Mm.
which get mixed down by Joe and Chris, the mixers, to basically for this show it's a 6-channel surround master, which then gets folded down to a stereo. Um, but so on the background side, which a lot of people, everybody kind of knows, like the gunshots and the sound design and the cool stuff, but the the background tracks are really important. A lot of thought is put into them, because, like we were talking about, those background tracks are going to set the world of that scene, and it will tell you. That's what's going to tell you: are we in the city? Are we out in the woods? Are we not in the real world? Are we on a space station? Are we on an alien planet? You know, the sounds will help us decide or determine where we are. And the other thing we do with them is a little trick is we don't provide just like one set of background tracks. We don't just provide like woods or city. Uh, Typically we cut anywhere between 5 and 6 stereo backgrounds, and then another 3 or 4 mono backgrounds, and then usually there's what we call spotted backgrounds, which would be like the dogs, which are placed in specific places. You
Mhm.
don't want the dog bark to happen when one character says "I love you" to the other, right? Like you want to clear it out. So
Right.
there's what's called spotted backgrounds, and not only are there a lot of tracks so that we can adjust the balance of them, but oftentimes the thing we do is backgrounds usually don't play consistent all the way through the scene. In real life, it is kind of a consistent, but in the real life, your ears can be very directional, and you can tune out the sound around you and focus on certain things. So if you're in a noisy location, but someone's talking to you, you can kind of look at their lips and kind of tune out some of that world around you.
Mhm.
When you're watching a TV show, you can't, because the sound isn't coming to you in the same way as it is in the real world. We're kind of mimicking it. So the other thing we have lots of different tracks is, we might have it be busy or noisy at the top of the scene and play more of the backgrounds to give you a sense of where we are. But then we might start pulling some of those back. And during the scene, we might I call it bubbling. We kind of create a bubble around the characters, sometimes just so you can understand what they're saying, sometimes so that you're not distracted and they can be, if it's an emotional scene. Sometimes score comes in, and so we back those out to create space for the score to then fill up the sonic landscape. And so having lots of separate tracks allows us to decide which ones we want to take down and which ones we want to leave. If it's just one track, you would hear suddenly everything just drop out and then come back. But if we have layers of stuff, we can take out maybe some of the more noisy ones. If the scene is out on a city street and we're seeing construction in the background, well, then we'll have lots of construction tracks. But like, again, if they get into a very emotional moment, we might kind of pull those out to leave space for, what's important to the scene.
That's so cool. And yeah, so when you're making this sound, like you're doing it like, based off of reality, what you would hear, but then there's also um some scenes in Cobra Kai that that kind of go away from that. And for example, season 5, Sam LaRusso, her vision at the spa, where
Yeah.
she's kind of in her own head. The voice, like everything's kind of silent. The voices are kind of like, "You're Sam LaRusso 2.0." Like it is like a
Yeah.
little, like there's a little sound there. I can't really mimic it, but yeah, what was that like? Because obviously you have no frame of reference for like what a vision sounds
Yeah.
like.
Well, it all starts, I always say the first sound editors on any project are actually the filmmakers and the editor, right? They're the first. So and actually the writer, sometimes, really good writers incorporate sound ideas at the script level. Um, and it carries all the way through. Sometimes they develop things in the editorial. And that was a case of kind of half being developed by the editor in the edit room, and then us kind of playing with it after that. I know we went back, there was a lot of back and forth on that particular thing about how much we wanted to affect the voices and make them seem weird and echoey. And, you know, again, it's kind of a cliche, but it really works. Is echo on a voice makes it seem like it's bouncing around in your head, right? So it kind of creates that idea
Mm.
of we're in her head, we're not in the real world, because the sound's just kind of bouncing around. That's supposed to mimic the psychological effect of when you're getting caught up in your own head and you're just hearing all these voices in your head. So we're trying to kind of come up with an external way of demonstrating that. And sound does a big part of it. And then of course, filming in that blank space, right, where she's kind of in this nebulous world. But we kind of went back and forth. I think we initially, the mixers and I actually pulled back a little bit on. We thought we had maybe gone too far. We're nervous sometimes. Sometimes in sound, you're nervous that you're like doing it just because it's cool sound and not
Mhm.
working for the story. And I think we actually pulled it back a little bit, and then the guys were like, "No, go for it. Let's." let's make this weird and have the voices, and because if you're listening to it in 5.1, the voices are being panned around. So we're also playing in the real world scenes. Dialogue always plays in the center speaker. You don't really ever, even if a character is on the left side of the screen or the right side of the screen, the dialogue always plays in the middle, for a couple reasons. It becomes distracting, but also for clarity, to understand the dialogue, having it in the center makes it the easiest to understand. So usually the dialogue plays in the center, but in this case we were kind of moving it, all
Mm,
around her. And then there was, the notes I got were, sometimes you'll get the notes are like, do something cool here. you know, Sometimes they're very specific about what they want, and sometimes they're like, you know, and so sometimes I'll, part of the job of a sound supervisor is holding for the jet plane flying overhead.
mm,
Uh, you don't realize how many jets fly overhead where you live until you try to shoot a film or a project
mm.
there, or the original location for Mr. Miyagi's house. They were holding for jet planes all the time there.
Wow.
Um, but part of my job is communicating between the client, the creators of the show, and the sound team, because there isn't time for them to meet with every single individual sound editor on the show. So they communicate to me, and then I translate what they've said into sound nerd speak for the editors. And so oftentimes they'll say, do something cool here. And so I'll throw out some suggestions, but I also really want to empower the editors to be creative. So I'll say, cut 3 or 4 options, cut some stuff, and that you think works here. And then oftentimes Chris, who's the sound effects mixer, kind of just auditions each track and then just starts kind of playing with various combinations. Again, usually you never deliver just one sound for anything, so it's layers of sound. Like on punches and kicks in the fight scenes, it isn't just a single track. Usually there's 3 or 4 different tracks that comprise one punch, and some of them are more realistic sounding and kind of have that, skin on skin, kind
Mhm.
of this kind of sound. And then there's also tracks that actually have a higher, more crunchy sound to it. And then there's the sound design tracks, which will have a low end. I think I talked about that earlier. They'll have that low end sound to it. And the idea behind that is not only so that we can kind of, if it's a more, if it's a more surreal moment, or it's supposed to be a very impactful punch, we can make it sound so. But also by having the different layers, we can make sure every punch doesn't sound the same. So rather than having every hit just be, constantly, um, we can make one punch can sound with a little more high end, and it'll be like, oh, got hit on the collarbone or someplace that, that would really hurt.
Mm.
And then we can make another punch sound more like, oh, really, like a body punch, and oh, that has a lot of low end, and that one really, got in there. Um, so I'm probably rambling now about sound, but
I love it.
okay, but yeah. So to close on that, it's there's a lot of talk um, with the sound designer, sound editor, and then a lot of experimentation on the stage. And the great thing with working on this show is the guys, the big three, are really open to, like, they have a vision. That's what you want. They have a clear vision of what they want,
Mm.
but within that clear vision, they're like, if there are ways you think we can accomplish this, please, on the stage, if you have some ideas, play some things. I'm doing a new show with them, and I have this.
Obliterated?
Yeah, obliterated. We mixed the first one with the guys on Tuesday, so it'll have already, by the time everybody's seen this, it'll already have been done. But the first episodes will be done, finished this week. Very excited. But
Congratulations.
I have some ideas for a character, a couple little sound things that I'm excited to play for them, because they're very open and collaborative, and it isn't like you have to do it our way. It's, this is the end result that we want. Here's how we think we can get there. But if you have some suggestions on how to do it, you know, feel free to try that and play it for us. So they're and that's what you want. You want someone who has a clear vision. That's what's great about working with them, because they fit exactly the exact type of person that's great to work with when you're doing sound. And I'm sure they're the same way with the cinematographer and the DPs and cameramen and wardrobe and obviously the actors, which is they have a clear vision and a clear direction to give you, but then they're also open to letting you kind of improve upon what their suggestion was with your expertise and whatever you bring to the project.
That's amazing. That's awesome. And so you've seen the first episode or first couple episodes of Obliterated. What do you think of the show so far?
Uh,
Even though it's not like obviously you're working on it, like based on the footage you've seen.
I've seen all the episodes.
Oh, you've seen
We're
all of it.
already, yeah, we're already. I mean, I can't. This has I. This doesn't have anything to do with when it's going to be released because that's way beyond my pay grade. But
Mhm.
all the episodes are ready to mix, so we're deep into it. So I obviously can't say anything spoilery about it. Um, but it's now here's the thing. It's not Cobra Kai, and it's not for the same audience. So my first thing would be is this is not
Mhm.
a family show. Please, 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 please do not sit down with your kids to watch Obliterated. In fact, I think the guys were very adamant that they don't want Netflix to say from the creators of Cobra Kai, because
Uh,
this is from the creators of Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, if you
mm,
know what I mean.
yeah.
This is very very. I'm sure if it was a theatrical movie, it would be R rated. Like actually it would be very R rated. Um, yeah, it's funny and raunchy and lots of action and just it's you know what, it's something that I have not seen in a TV series. I've only ever seen movies do this kind of action comedy where that comedy is just as big as the action. So now like there have been like action series where there's little quips and little little asides and bits of humor, but this is full on comedy
Mm.
and action. So I'm curious to see how the audience responds. I mean, I you know I never know. I think it's great and gonna go well, um, and do well. Um, so we'll see. But again, it's great because the guys have a very clear sense of what they want, and then they've left some openings, whether it's in the ADR or the sound effects, to for me to kind of help get across, whether it's help land a joke or a character arc, or this is also action. So build up some of the action moments because this is like Cobra Kai is bigger than life in certain senses, but it's still kind of grounded in the reality of karate tournaments and family drama. And this
Mm.
is Navy SEALs with high tech guns and equipment and bombs and helicopters and it's it's a much bigger than life uh, show. So we'll see. But it's the same team. Like it's the same sound team. It's all the people who do Cobra Kai are involved in the sound, um, and so I'll be curious to see how what people think. But don't. It's I would say don't depending on how you raise your kids. Everybody has their own. But I would say if the kid's not at least 16 or 17, maybe you don't
Yeah.
want. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I wasn't sure if I was old enough to, if I was mature enough to watch it.
It's
But yeah,
like, you know.
that'll be something else. Yeah, it'll be. I mean, it's gonna be fun just because it's a different. It's not like a spin off or a continuation of Cobra Kai, which would be great if there is down the line. But this is like a totally different thing that has a totally different feel and vibe to it.
Mm. Wow, I'm excited. I'm excited for that. I'll be checking it out. So I'm ready for it. Now we obviously talked about like what you do. Like you mentioned a lot of this stuff, but I do want to get like like a definition for those out there who might not know like what a supervising sound editor is. I know you touched on it, but
Mm-hmm.
but if you could explain exactly like what that position is that you signed on for and like anything maybe that you didn't mention already with that job.
Well, I mean, so as with a lot of roles that have supervisor in it, it's about communication. So you know, I think everybody kind of has an idea of what editors are. Editors are the artists on a film or TV show or short film, whatever, who work with the material after it's been filmed. So they're kind of the main cogs of post production. And I don't know if you've heard. There's the saying is a film, and it can be the same TV show, gets made 3 times: when you write it, when you shoot it, and when you edit it.
Mm.
Right? You write it, you come up with a story, you shoot it, you discover new things, and then as you look through the footage, you come up with even new ideas. The famous one is in end of season 4. Shout out to the editors on Cobra Kai when Sam is fighting TORY, and they start doing that kind of when they're circling each other, and then we cut back to them circling each other at the end of season 2 in the high school. That
Yeah.
wasn't in the script. That was the editor working with the footage and seeing that shot of them circling and thinking, that looks like the shot. And what if we actually cut back and kind of help play up that this three season arc, seasons 2, 3, 4, is now culminating in this moment. And it's like brilliant. It was great. But that was created in the edit stage and not initially at the script stage.
Wow.
It was the script stage helped create it by creating this arc, right? But the actual visuals of how we're going to show that was developed in editing. So that's what the editors do. So the question is, how do the editors know what they're doing? And that's where, for the sound side, I come in. So as the supervising sound editor, I kind of have 3 jobs. So the first job, like four. We'll break it down to 4. Make it easy. 4. The first step is to meet with the client, meet with if it's a film, the director, if it's a TV show, the showrunner or the post producer, whoever's kind of in charge, and watching the show, watching the episode, and discussing what they want. There's a lot. 80% of what I do, I don't have to talk to them because I just know there are certain things that you always do with any show. You got to clean up the dialogue so people can hear it. You got to make things technically fit within the specs of the streamer or network or whoever that's going to play it, right? Like they all have technical Yeah, it has to be technically correct. People have to hear the dialogue. You got to cover all the locations and, like we said, to give it backgrounds and cover anything that's missing, all that kind of stuff. But that other 20% is what I'm meeting with them, which is to talk about things that maybe wouldn't be obvious, things that they're going for emotionally within the story, or information they want to give that isn't obvious on first glance. So I meet with them and I take detailed notes on what we discuss. So that's kind of job 1, which is getting all the information from the client so that they don't have to talk to every single person individually. Then job 2 is getting all that information to the editors, answering their questions, reviewing things if they have questions. The way TV works so quickly is what happens over time is with the editors, so on Cobra Kai, I think we've had the same sound effects editors since season 3. So they've done 3, 4, 5, and they'll be back on 6. So they really know the show now, and in a sense, they know the sound effects on the show way better than I do, right? So now there's less time I have to spend talking with them because I just give them the notes and they go, okay, yeah, got it, right? They already know what that is. So talking to the editors, communicating on the sound effect side, is there sound design moments, like those moments we talked about? What kind of sounds would work there? Is it a callback? Is it sounds that should be reminiscent of season 2, episode 6 or whatever? All the time I'll be going back. I keep all those notes for all the seasons. And one of the advantages of having the same team year after year is if they say this should be reminiscent of, when Mary was imagining everybody was calling her out in her head and, in season 5. I can just pull that episode up and tell the editors, find their truly used on this one and make a variation of that. On the dialogue side, I'll talk about maybe problematic lines where it was hard to hear or the mic got a little muffled or, things of that nature. And, look and see if you can find a different take of such and such a line where it's clean and we can understand what they're saying, but the performance is the same, things like that. talk to the Foley artist for the Foley team. There's special things in Foley and so on. So that's kind of the second job. Then the third job is kind of like the part that I actually do. Like I do a lot of talking, and then the part I actually do is on TV. Some in feature films and bigger giant projects. There's a separate person who does this, but on the smaller scale, I also do, which is ADR supervision. So queuing all the ADR and then supervising all the sessions. And that's part of my favorite part because that's the one part where I get to interface with the actors. So
Mm,
that's a part I really love and I take pride in it because before I supervised, I was a dialogue ADR editor. So I came up through TV cutting dialogue in ADR. So I was an editor and a dialogue editor first. So I got really good at that. And then I am also a filmmaker. I have a feature film I wrote and directed. I've done many short films. So I do have directing experience, which I think helps me understand how to communicate with actors. So if there's a session where they need me to kind of be in the driver's seat for it, and like none of the guys can be there, I can talk in a way I think that helps the actors get what they're going for. And because I've cut ADR for so long, I know if what we got is going to work or not. So I do all that. And then the final job I do is so now we get to the stage and the dub stage. And that's where what everybody kind of knows. It's the big board with lots of lights and faders and a giant screen in front of us. And nowadays, it's usually there's usually a 3-person team on the stage. There's 2 mixers and a mix tech. So there's a guy who's the mix tech who's kind of running the room to make sure everything gets recorded properly, make sure everything's working, and kind of like is the engineer of the room. And then there's 2 mixers, and one mixer is in charge of the dialogue and the music, and then the other one is in charge of the sound effects and the Foley. The clients don't have the time to show up from the very beginning at the stage. You know, John, Josh, and Hayden, you know, Cobra Kai is a 2-day mix. Obliterated being a longer, big show is 5-day mix. But they can't spend that much time on a stage.
mhm,
So the next job or you know, the kind of the final job I have is I'm on the stage kind of representing them. And as the mixers mix, if they have questions or problems or concerns or need clarification or isn't sure why a track is prepped the way it is or what the clients want, I'm there to provide guidance.
mm,
And sometimes I get it wrong, but you know, hopefully most of the time I'm giving them the right answers. So I'm there guiding them through it so that on the final day, when the guys come in for their playback, I've kind of made sure that the mixers went in the right direction. Because again, the mixers don't have the time to sit ahead of time and go to these spotty sessions and stuff. They're mixing other shows. So I'm the one who's kind of been at the spot, worked with the editors, and now sitting on the stage to answer any questions and like if they need fixes or if things, you know, like sometimes you take a stab, you try something, then you play and you're like, that's not working. We need to go a different route with that. We do that. And then when the client comes, I sit there and I answer questions that they might have, you know, there'll always be, especially with these guys, it'll always be like, you know, what are the other ADR takes like? Like in this one, they're angry. Do we have one where they're happy or sad? Or, you know,
mhm.
and so then I'm digging through the tracks and showing them what I got. You know, Josh one time got Johnny was shaking salt onto his food he'd made, and Josh was like, "That's the wrong salt shaker sound." You know, Josh is the one who's very into specificity, and
Mm.
I was like, okay, let me go find some news like that. But that's the level of detail, and it's good, right? It's good to have to not just do things just because well whatever. Like everything is very very specific. Maybe I don't know. Maybe Johnny's salt shaker wasn't macho enough and tough enough. Johnny doesn't have a wimpy salt shaker.
That's so funny.
Fear does not exist in this salt shaker. Uh, so, but and then they sign off on the mix, and we then usually then there's a playback for the executives, right? The people at Sony or Netflix or whatever, whoever's doing the show, and they might have a couple notes, and then that episode's done, and then usually the very next day, right on to the next one. You know, they
Mm.
they come fast and furious in TV.
Wow. So obviously there's a lot of work to be done. So can you give us an idea of like the timeline of all this? So what
Yeah,
once the season is done filming,
yeah.
then what?
So I mean, so it depends on streaming shows that drop all at once versus network shows. So um, I also do a show called Fire Country that's on CBS, which is a totally different thing, but it's a great show, great people. So I'll give a shout out to my Fire Country peeps. Um, that's a show that airs every Friday. So they that show we're finishing episodes and airing them while they're still filming, right? So they film an episode, and then the following couple of weeks they're editing it, and then about a month after they filmed it they lock it and they turn it over to us, and then we do our work, and then it airs, and they're still, while that episode airs, they're still filming. There might be 3 or 4 episodes further ahead filming. um, Cobra Kai does it more feature style than a lot of the streamers do, because all the episodes air at once. You know, everything drops at once. As Cobra Kai fans know, you then stay up all night and you watch all of them right away. We've all done that. We've all binged the show.
Of course.
Um, so they do all the filming. Now they're editing the episodes as they film them, right? So it isn't like they don't wait till after they're done filming to start. So by
Mm.
the time they're done filming, they already have good cuts on each of the shows.
Oh.
Uh, and then, but you know, they turn over to us more quickly than a weekly show, because they have them kind of all right. So like, you know, they might turn over two at a time, and oftentimes with Cobra Kai we do kind of, to help ease the workflow, oftentimes we kind of work on two at a time. So we'll get episodes 1 and 2, and then a week or two later we'll get episodes 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6 and so on. But just to show you how fast it goes contractually in the contract, from the point excuse me, from the point they turn over to us the episode until the first day of the mix is 5 business days. So we only get 5 business days to prep the show. Now, oftentimes they give us more than that. Like that's not like it isn't like they just sit on the episode and wait. You know, like, oh, you only get 5 business days. So they're nice, and usually they give us more time than that, simply because they're an organized. That's a very organized. Mallory Young, the post producer, another person who get you know, sound, and there's a lot of people who work on a show who no one knows about, and Mallory Young would be one of the big ones because she runs the entire post production on the show. So everything from editing to color to VFX to sound, like all of that stuff runs through her, and it runs through very smoothly and is very organized. So she's someone who deserves a lot of props in the Cobra Kai world, and she's been on it since season 2.
Wow.
So she's been running the show for a long time. But uh, 5 business days. So typically, if they do the shortest turnaround, it's really day one. I'm spotting it and queuing the ADR. The next 3 days, I'm doing the ADR, and I'm communicating with the editors around whenever I'm doing the ADR. And then on the 4th day, I'm on the stage mixing with the guys. And then the next day, John, Joss, and Hayden show up, and we do a playback for them in the morning. We do their notes through lunch into the early afternoon, and then early afternoon, um, we do a second playback, and that's when, if any executives from Sony or Netflix are going to join us, and typically they join for, like, you know, the first few and maybe the last one. But then, you know, once they kind of get a sense of, okay, everything's going smoothly, you know, usually they don't kind of have the time to show up to every mix. So sometimes the second mix is just a second round for all of us.
Mm.
But that's how quick sound can go. It can, for this show being a shorter show, 5 days. Now, obliterated is something like 12 business. 7 business days to prep, five more days of mixing. So it's a 12-day turnaround, but it's a much longer show. So there's not only is it more complex and crazy, but there's just more minutes to cut. And Cobra Kai has become challenging because, I don't know if I'm sure you've noticed this. The first season, the length of an episode averaged about 25 minutes.
Hmm.
Now the average length of an episode is 34 minutes. So over time, there's been a lot more Cobra Kai to cut, which I'm sure the fans love that, right? More.
Yeah.
Season 5 of Cobra Kai was way more Cobra Kai than season 1.
Oh my,
There was
that
there was a lot.
finale. That
Yeah,
finale was a long one.
it was 44, 45 minutes. It was the longest episode by quite a bit. But that's how quickly and the way that works and that's lightning fast compared to feature films. And the part of the way we're able to do that is because now it's that was season 5 coming up to season 6. So we kind of know, I have to ask way less questions of the guys
Mm.
because I already know what they're going to want. The editors can just jump into the work and not have to wait to talk to me because I already know what they want. The mixers, when they mix, are more facing the board mixing and way less turning around asking me questions about stuff because again they already know. So that's part of it, is developing that speed, is just the knowledge of having worked on it week after week after week.
Yeah, and even, like, going to Obliterated, even though it is a brand new show for all of you, the fact that you are working with the same crew, is that, like, helping a lot to, like, where you have the process down? Or is it like, "Okay, this is a new show, like, there's still a lot to talk out and figure out?"
It's 50-50. It is a new show, so there are questions I have to ask that were never asked on Cobra Kai, right?
Mhm.
You know, when the attack helicopter swoops in over that doesn't, we haven't had that on, well, yet. Who knows? We're not
Season
done yet.
6?
Yeah,
John Kreese, maybe?
Actually, I take that back. We did have helicopters swooping in the flashbacks at the end of season 3
Oh,
in
yes.
Vietnam.
Yes.
So I did already have those. I just ruined my own point. Uh, so there are things that are new, but it goes much faster. And and Obliterated is, I mean, the title says it all. It's something else. Like, and again, I don't want to say anything at all. I don't even want to say what I think is public knowledge about it, because I just want to make sure I don't actually add an extra spoiler thing. Um, but it's gone, considering how crazy the show is, it's gone really smoothly, in part because it's not a new team of people, right? So there's a continuity there, and that's also why, you know um, I always say, I'm sure it's true in a lot of different businesses, but Hollywood filmmaking, TV is a people business. It's a relationship business, and that's because once you find people who get what you're going for and work well with you, it's much easier just to continue to work with those people and those relationships that you have, rather than bringing someone in new each time, because you do have to start over again and build that language of understanding. Whereas, and the great thing about, again, John, Josh, and Hayden, if you'll notice, you'll see the same actors pop up. You know, you'll see the same crew members who worked on one thing with them work on another. The sound, like I said, we've had the same sound crew now for 3 going on 4 seasons of Cobra Kai, and they also, same people on Obliterated. They recognize that, and they're loyal to their people, and they're like, if we get inside the circle of the big 3 circle of trust, they respect that, and they reward that by coming back to you whenever they can, which is great.
Yeah, so that's really interesting that you brought that up, because yeah, you do see that a lot, like, in Hollywood and in the industry, like a lot of the same people working together because of the camaraderie. But you've worked on so many projects, and I'm sure you've worked with a lot of different people, a lot of different personalities. Sometimes people may not always know what they're doing. Sometimes they may not be that nice, and I just want to ask you, like, how do you handle if you're working with someone and maybe they're not the kindest or they're not the best worker? Like, how do you handle a situation like that?
Obviously, you're talking about Sholo, because he's just that's no. First off, hopefully he never hears that. No, he's the sweetest kid.
Yeah.
Uh, so first off, I've been very lucky. Almost everybody I work with are like good human beings, right? So I don't, and And also, so like they're really good. On Cobra Kai, they're phenomenal. And Ralph and Billy set the tone, and the big three. Like, so on the actor side, they're the senior actors on the show. And all the young actors who have come up on that show learned from them. And they do
Mm.
it the right way. Those guys do it the right way. And so the kids learned it the right way, right? So you don't have a lot of issues and problems. You know, you'll notice you don't see a lot of news about Cobra Kai other than what an awesome show it is, right? Because
Yeah.
these, you know, other than the fact that they're getting other roles and doing amazing things, and then the same thing on the crew side. You know, the big three have set a collaborative, friendly tone that then ripples down through. Which is to say, there isn't, you know, there's always creative dust ups and arguments, but that's, I think, the key is recognizing that passionate debate over creative decisions isn't personal. And if someone says that sounds wrong, they're not saying you're wrong. What they're saying is, you know, this approach isn't right for what we want here. It might be right somewhere else, but for what we need right now, we need to search. You know, in season 1, there was an editor who's no longer on the show who got on me about the sound of elastic in a waistband. If you remember when a certain someone gets an atomic wedgie at the lake, and I cut like 18 or 19 different elastic snap sounds for
Wow.
that, and he was having trouble. He was having trouble communicating the sound he wanted, and so I was having to cut a lot of sounds, and he was getting frustrated. And he started kind of taking it out on me for not being able to get the sound that he wanted. But I get that the frustration wasn't really with me. The frustration was like, I'm not communicating the
Mm.
sound I want. And eventually we found the right sound. It just took, it took a little extra time because it required a little trial and error versus like being able to just instantaneously communicate it. That also, again, shows you the level of detail that goes into every single little thing in this show. The fact that we spent 30 minutes investigating the right snap sound for that. That was I think it was the thong wedgie, if I recall.
Yes. Yeah.
But recognizing the same thing on the ADR stage, actors are under a lot of pressure. The thing I always try to remind people is, one, they're not the characters they play. Joe is a sweetheart. Be nice to Joe. He's the nicest guy in the world, and he's really good at playing an obnoxious villain. And I'm curious to see what happens with him in season 6. Now, at the end of season 5, I'm curious to see where they go with him. I'm a big fan of Joe, if you can't tell.
I can tell. I love it. Me too. I love Kyler.
Well, yeah, I know some people have like yelled at him on the street and stuff because he plays a
Yeah.
villain, and I'm like, no, guys. Most of the actors who play villains are usually the nicest people in real life. But the thing is, they're the ones who we're seeing on screen, and they're the ones everybody's going to talk about.
Mm.
And so if I don't do the very best at my job, no one's going to stop me on the street and go. They're going to say, no one's going to say, Patrick, that punch, in season 4, episode 5, when Johnny and Daniel were fighting, that one punch, man, that wasn't very good. What were you thinking? Like, that's never going to happen, right? But the actors are the face of the show. So if they didn't do something that's to the very best of their ability, and they do something that the critics pick apart and so on, people on the street, are going to go, hey, you were in that lousy movie or TV show, So I get that the pressure's on them. So to me, the big thing like I said, I only interface with the actors in ADR, but and that's usually where the most stressful moments come up, because like they might be asked to do a new line that's totally different, 180 degrees from what they had originally intended to do in the scene when it was filmed, and now
Mm.
all these months later, they're being asked to revisit this very intense emotional moment and now do it in a totally different way with none of the acting props that they had at the time. So, it might be, I did a thing where an actor was in the real scene, he was freezing to death in the cold and called his brother to say goodbye. And now, because there was a snow machine on the set, we couldn't use the sound. So I had to have him do it in ADR. And he was really upset because it was actually really cold when he filmed it, and it was late at night, and he was sitting there leaning up against a car in the cold, holding a phone, talking to his, brother on the show. And now he's in this nice warm ADR stage. He just had a cup of coffee, you know. Maybe he was doing business when negotiating his next deal, or who knows. And now he suddenly has to get back to that moment. And the
Yeah.
worry, of course, is that it'll now sound fake compared to how they were able to do it in the moment. ADR is really where your acting chops come to the forefront, because you have to just act it, and you don't have a lot of those, like I said, the props. Meaning not necessarily just props, but just like you don't even have the other person. You're in a scene where you're going to say "I love you" to someone, right? The first time you say "I love you" to someone, and now you're just looking at a screen of your own face, and the person isn't there anymore. How do you get back and say it with the same intensity and inflection, and so it can be tough. And so when the actors get a little bristly or question it, I totally get that they're doing it from a space of, I'm trying to protect the integrity of the show, and I'm trying to protect my own performance. And again, part of working on a show season after season, and why you want to bring the same people back, is that level of trust. I think the Cobra Kai actors trust that when I ask them to do an ADR line, it's because the production line is maybe just not usable. And sometimes I'll say, hey, we're getting this as a safety, and I promise you we're going to do everything in our power to fix the original line that was said in the moment, in the heat of the battle, or in the, and we're getting this one as a backup. And then we also make sure we work with them on the stage and give them the space if they want to do. Billy will do an ADR line a gazillion times until he gets it right. Like I admire that about him, right? We'll do 25 takes of a line, and the rest of us will be like, yeah, we got a good take in there. Like take 18 was really good. And Billy would go, no, I can do better. And then like he'll do 5 more takes, and then he'll go, oh wait, I got it now. And then take 26 will be like money. It'll just be
Mm,
perfect. And it'll be like, okay, he worked hard and he got to it. And I really appreciate it with actors. So when they're challenging lines and asking things like that, I don't mind it at all, because it's, the only thing that there's no tolerance for is, obviously personal attacks, when you try to, attack someone, you know, and most of the actors will, some of them will even be like, there'll be a heated exchange over, why are we doing this and this, and then they'll say, I'm sorry, I'm nervous, it's not you, it's da da da. So I totally respect that, and I'm sure that happens in every department, and I'm sure it happens on set a lot. And it's just kind of, it's recognized that especially when you're doing emotionally charged moments, you're already ramped up and very emotional, and sometimes that can leak out. But it's all for getting the right performance. And like I said, as long as it's not personal and mean, and it's arguing over the merits of the work and what's the best way to proceed with something, then everybody knows it. And at the end, you shake hands and high five, and you're all one
yeah.
big happy family.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because it reminds me of Martin Cove's audition for the Karate Kid. Do you know that story?
I don't know the story. I'm sure. I'll, I'll ask them to hear it sometime. But what's the story?
Yeah, basically the simple version of it is they, they asked him, he had the audition scheduled, and then they like called him up and were like, actually, we want you to come in tomorrow. And it was supposed to be like the week after, and he was so like angry, because like you guys scheduled me for next week, and now you're telling me it's tomorrow. So his wife told him, basically, like, take that anger that you have for them and use it in the audition. So he goes into the audition room and he's like, John Avildsen, you're a real putz for not giving me time to prepare. And you, Jerry Weintraub, what the hell's the matter with you? And basically they're like, oh, you're perfect. You got the role.
That's great. It's being an actor is tough, because you often get rejected for things out of control. Like the audition, they're like, "Yeah, we liked you, but you're too tall," or "Oh, we
Mm,
liked you, but you're too short." I mean, you can't fix that. I had the feature film I did way back in the day. The lead actress who got the role was given the wrong information by her manager, And she showed up to the audition thinking that she was like this like rocker chick. So she was wearing like an AC/DC t-shirt, like ripped jeans and like teased out hair and the whole deal. And we're like, what? She goes, I'm reading for the role of Brady. We're like, oh no, she's a college student who's a psychology major whose boyfriend is in pre-law. It's like, and she was like, but what happened? She said, can you give me 30 minutes? And we're like, yeah, take. So she went off and kind of read the sides
Oh my
and kind
god.
of probably went to the bathroom and flattened her hair and came back and gave a really good read. And I remember at the time talking to the cast director, we're like, you know what? She only had a short time to like completely flip her whole preparation. She did a great job, and that showed that she's very, she can take direction. She can she can go a different direction without needing a lot of prep time, and that really impressed me that she was able to flip it so quickly, and she got the role in part because she was able to like that quickly nail the character. So you never know.
That's very impressive. And I did have a question, going back to the ADR.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, as you talked about, when you're doing ADR, it's additional voiceover work
Mm,
after filming, but obviously you want to blend it in with the filming as best as possible because you don't want people to be watching the show and being like, "Oh, that was an inserted line." Like, you want it to feel natural. So like, how do you do that with like, do you have the same microphones, like the voice levels, the environments of the sounds? Because obviously when you're filming it then and there, it'll sound more natural than in a studio with like,
mm.
like surround like soundproof stuff. So how do you blend it in as best as possible when you do
I'm going to give away all of our secrets, and we'll be unemployed soon because everybody at home will be able
that?
to. uh, No, but you're right. So it's a lot of different pieces that have to come together. So the most important one is the actor. The actor having control. I would say the actor having control of their instrument, which is their voice. So it starts with getting a good performance that's at the right pitch and tone, with the right intensity level and inflection and so on that they had on the day. Um, Theater trained actors generally, not always, but often are better at ADR because they've learned to deliver a line night after night after night, with the same timing and same, in a play on a live stage, you can't like freestyle and suddenly do something else because the other actors are all their timing is all tied to you. So they learn how to, in a sense, theater is kind of almost like ADR in the sense that every night you have to duplicate it.
Mhm.
Um, so that's where it starts, and that's part of what I do as the ADR when I'm doing ADR is putting on other hats that aren't technically sound. Might be psychological. Um, helping the actor figure out um, how to get to that. Giving some small note adjustments and not line readings on how to get to where they were. Or oftentimes the most challenging ones are when they're asked to change it, to something different and not just match it. Um, and then there's just technical things like paying attention to the pitch of their voice. When they say the line now, a month later, is the pitch of their voice higher or lower? Oftentimes, in shows, Karate Kid fight days. I mean, sorry, Cobra Kai fight days. Um, Obliterated some of that. The actors have been yelling all day. Their voice has a little bit lower,
Mm.
huskier sound to it. And now it's 3 months later and it's 8 a.m. and they come in first thing in the morning and their voice isn't matching. So sometimes it's helping them warm up their voice. Sometimes we'll do a line earlier in the session or later in the session, depending upon where we want their voice to be. So getting the actor's performance and inflection and voice to match is the biggest thing. Then the second thing is, and you mentioned this, using the right microphones. A lot of people think that when you do ADR, you want to have the most expensive mic in the world in the best placement. So that's voiceover. So when you have voiceover or vocals in a song, you might have a $10,000 vocal mic and you might put it right here in front of voice to get that bass proximity, the in a world where, that kind of voiceover type thing, right? But we don't want that.
Yeah.
So all the good ADR stages around the world have a complement of mics that are the same mics that are used on location on set. And so that's what we do. We make sure we use either the exact same mic or a mic that's comparable in tone and character. And
Mm.
we place the mics in the same place they would be on set. So rather than having the mic here, the mic is actually up
Wow.
where the boom would have been in the shot. And we also usually always do a double mic. 9 times out of 10, it's boom and lav because that's normally what it is. But like if the actor was at a podium speaking into a microphone at a podium, we might add a microphone that's down here mimicking that location instead. But the lav mic is always put on them, not on a stand, but actually clipped on to mimic where it would be, under their shirt hidden when they film. And with a lot of the stages I like to work with, beyond that, they're not even, it's also a wireless microphone the same way it is on set. So rather than being a lav mic that's wired, even though they're on a stage, it's still on a transmitter pack and it's transmitting because that transmission adds a certain compression and characteristic to the sound. So we try to mimic the sound. So if we do all of that, when we get to the stage, it's the right tone, it's the right inflection, it's the right performance, it's recorded with a similar mic. Then the mixer's job, the final piece of the puzzle, is adding the environment to the sound. So if they're inside, that might be reverb, because when you're talking in a room, the sound's reflecting off the walls. If you're outside, it might be a little bit of a delay because the sound is slapping off of buildings and stuff and coming back to you. Or conversely, if you're outdoors, it might be kind of taking away any reflections and sounds that were in the recording on the ADR stage. Sometimes you have to record in very small ADR stages and you start to hear the sound reflecting off of the surfaces. All the time, actors show up wearing ball caps to ADR sessions. And the first thing we do is like turn that ball cap around because that bill on the hat will cause the sound to bounce up
Mm.
into it and you can hear it. But the mixer is adding sometimes, and then they do some EQing because even though we try to match the mics, oftentimes they're not exactly the same mic. Or on a lav mic, the placement, on set they may have hid the mic here, but obviously we clipped it here. So there's slight little, so the mixer's doing a little bit of EQing on the voice to make it match, and then adding that whatever the ambience was and the atmosphere. And if we do all of those things properly, 9 times out of 10, you never know that you're listening to a line that was recorded after the fact.
Wow. I feel like we're getting like a master class right now on sound. It's so cool.
I was like, I should be just telling funny Cobra Kai stories, but instead I'm doing a class on
I
sound
lo-
editing. Sorry.
no, I love it. I love it. I think it's really, really interesting because it just goes to show how much goes into it. Like as you mentioned, like I mean Johnny pouring salt. It's like it's such a minimal thing in the show, but it's the attention to detail that
Yeah.
that Josh noticed it, that you guys have to um work on that.
Oh, it's
So cool.
some of the debates. I wouldn't say arguments, but some of the debates on stage, and I'm sure again it happens at all levels, but I'm just privy to the sound side on this show. You know, we can there are 20-minute debates, over, what sound, would happen when X, when this or that happens,
Mhm.
how much, you know, when Robby chews the El Dragon pepper, right? Debates over. No, I mean, but there's debates like we're gonna find out it's not really a pepper. But in the moment, we want to fool the audience and they're thinking it's a pepper. But how, like, should we add something that kind of, if you went back and listened to it a second time, would you catch that, that it's not a real pepper and that it's a little
Mhm.
bit too chewy, not crisp? Like all those little things, every last little detail
Wow.
is, and that's what makes for a really quality show when across the board, the detail is, the attention to the detail is being put into it.
Yeah. So you mentioned this, but it's so awesome. You've worked on every episode of Cobra Kai. So
Yeah.
since We actually just May 2nd was the 5-year anniversary of Cobra Kai, so happy anniversary.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That's right. The first season came out quick. Back well, that was the YouTube days. So the turnaround
Yeah.
was Netflix has a much longer. Netflix releases around the world. So one of the things with Netflix is once we finish our work and deliver the mix, it's only just started because as soon as we're done, we're delivering the English mix. As soon as we're done with the episode, the next thing that happens actually is an M&E gets made, and M&E stands for music and effects. So basically, a
Mhm.
mix is made without the English, and it's not as simple as just taking the production track out because there's a lot of sound included in the production track that's not talking. If someone shakes hands in a scene while they're talking, we'll hear that handshake. Now, if we take their talking out, we're missing that sound. So there's a mixer who comes in who goes through every episode and kind of puts back in everything that was missing. But then for Netflix, they have teams who transcribe the episode into like 40 different languages. And then they have teams of actors who come in and voice it in Spanish and German and Italian and, Mandarin and, whatever the case may be. Um, but yeah, that first season was pretty quick. But the story it's a great story on when one door closes, another one opens. Um, in the fall of 2017, I was doing a series for CW, and I really liked the people on the show, but it wasn't like what they wanted and what we had contracted to provide them was at odds. And they kept wanting more and more than what we could give them. And when we said, "Hey, we need more money if you want more and more and more," they kind of bumped on that. And again, it's just business. They were nice people. I like them. I still work with them to this day, but it wasn't working out. And so, late November, early December, they left and went to a different company, which happens. But it left me suddenly with no work because we were only halfway through the series, and they left and went somewhere else.
Mhm.
And it was right at the holiday time, and you're like, "Oh, that's a horrible time to be unemployed." And my boss at Technicolor Sound called me out of the blue one day and he said, "So are you free now?" I went, "Yeah, they called me. They've officially left." And he goes, "Okay, well, I got this show coming in from these guys and they've never done TV before, and I'd love it if you could supervise it. It's a low budget thing, but if you're interested, it's called Cobra Kai." And I went, being of a certain age and of a fan, I was like, "You mean like from Karate Kid?" He goes, "I don't know." And I said, "Are they doing like a reboot or a spinoff of?" He goes, "It's for YouTube. They haven't done much TV before. These are new TV guys. So if you could hold their hands and make sure it goes smoothly, that would be great." And I'm like, "Oh my God." So I told my wife, like, I'm gonna be doing something that's it's like it has something to do with Karate Kid. It's Cobra Kai. And I remember going, I'm waiting to get the pilot script so I could start figuring out what we need. I remember going, "I hope they don't screw it up. I hope they don't screw it up. I hope they don't
Yeah.
screw it up." And then I read that first script and I was like, "Oh my God." Like in the script, you could tell right away, like they get it. Like these are
Mm.
fans of the show. This is a fresh spin on it, but it stays true and is a continuation. And it was funny and it was sweet and it was all the things that everybody loves about the show. And I remember going, "Oh wow, that's." And then there was like, "I hope I don't screw it up. I hope I don't screw it up." And then I met the guys and it was great. And because it started really small, what was great was they basically got to make the show they wanted. You know, they had a vision and everybody got on board to support them. And we didn't have much money and not a lot of people saw it, but it was there and it was just waiting for, and then, you know, the pandemic was horrible. But if you want to say there was one good thing that came out of the pandemic was Netflix needed material and they bought Cobra Kai and they re-released the first two seasons right when people were desperate for something good to see. And the rest is history.
Yeah. History repeats itself. It's from the year the best
But
around.
there you go. There you go. But it was a great. I was like, you know, I thought losing that show was a horrible thing. But in fact, being available and ready to go was one of the best moments of my career as a sound editor because I'll probably be known. Cobra Kai will be the thing I'm most. When people ask me what I work on, like I can list 20 shows. A lot of them people have never heard of. But when I say Cobra Kai, I've been in Italy talking to a guy who's Romanian. I was talking to a guy in Mexico. When I say Cobra Kai, they're all like, "Oh, Cobra Kai, I love that. I watched that with my kids."
Oh my
That's
god.
just it's a universal show.
It's amazing. And, Cobra Kai, obviously the sequel to the Karate Kid movies. We had 4 Karate Kid movies, counting, Dewey Pierce's next Karate Kid. So,
Mhm.
I wanna ask you, in terms of the sound for that movie, did you watch those movies again and kinda pay attention to the sounds there and then, like, replicate anything or enhance anything in Cobra Kai?
Good question, and that's exactly what I replicated and enhanced. So yeah, the first thing I did was I rewatched the first 2 movies. Um, I actually didn't watch the third because I didn't know we'd eventually, get all the way, way. I didn't know, the can't, but John Josh Davis from the beginning. If anything that Pat Morita was in is part of this world, right? So
Yeah.
all exists. So
Mhm.
which I love. Miyagi verse. That was so great. Um, so yeah, so I watched the movies, and one of the big things was recognizing the technical limitations of that time and how far sound has come, because that was just at the beginning of the transition into higher end sound formats and getting away from what was the optical print. To get technical for a second, film back in the day was an optical print, which was literally just a stripe down the side of the film, and it had very limited bandwidth and fidelity. And so, and a lot of those movies back then, some of them they've gone back and redone the sound for re-releases and stuff. Um, but listening to it, I was like, okay, they had some limitations here that we don't have, so we're going to modernize um, this sound and make it a little bit, more full, a little bit bigger than life. But the thing that I remembered from watching Karate Kid, and that we've stuck with all this way, is they made sure that the karate tournament fights had a sound, and they used now again, I don't know if it was because of the technical limitations or it was stylistically done, but they used the Foley a lot to create the sense of these are martial artists who aren't just kind of flailing around. They're doing very precise practiced moves that they've done in training hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. So when they snap their knee, their leg forward and bend at the knee and pivot with their hips and do all these things that martial artists have trained to do, that someone who was just kind of like drunk in a bar brawling wouldn't do. They used the sound of the Foley, and specifically there was a there was a crispness to the sound that I really liked, that you don't see nowadays. It's we talk about the low end stuff, right? There's a lot of that kind of like to make it sound powerful and deep, and it's the Marvel superhero kind of style of sound. And there was a crispness to the sound of the movement, and so I actually created, and I hope the Foley artists don't hate me for it, but for all the fight scenes, I added a new track that's called Crisp Cloth Movement. And what it is it's a separate. So when they do the Foley, one thing they do is they have a cloth, and they basically just, as people move, they do. You can barely hear it. It's almost imperceptible in
Mm.
real life, but it's there. And so they basically just watch the film or the TV show, and they just, and if it's very agitated, they'll go faster and slower or whatever. But they're just kind of creating that sense of that there's people who are wearing clothing, and that those things rustle and have a little life to them. So I had them do a separate one where I had them get a much stiffer, like the way a uniform would be, and I have them do very short, stiff sounds. And the idea then is to make it seem like when they're like, when you're, doing a punch or a kick or whatever it might be, that it's supposed to create that sense of, not that it's like just flailing, but there's a preciseness to it. And that sound is something that doesn't exist, I think, in a lot of other shows and films. And we don't, and it's also something that we don't use, like when Johnny's drunk fighting a guy at the bar. We don't use that because it's supposed to be until he suddenly like turns on his karate. But it's a specific sound that I was inspired by listening to the Karate Kid film, that is always included to kind of just try to set up the fact that these are trained martial artists who are fighting, and so it's kind of an homage to the original movie, and also helps tell the story, hopefully.
Wow. That's awesome. And I'm curiously where, your love for sound and sound editing came from. How did that start? And were there any films that inspired you based on the sound?
Yeah, that's funny. I'm wearing my T-shirt. My T-shirt. Oh, wait, there we go. Is there we go. It's the names of everybody from Aliens. So
Oh, okay.
80s James Cameron films was a big inspiration for me. Um, I mean, I'm a filmmaker myself. I came to LA to be a filmmaker. Um, but I had been doing some DJ work and played drums in a heavy metal band back in the day. And so I wouldn't say I'm a musician, but I appreciation of music, appreciation of sound. Um, I actually wrote a paper on the sound of the original Terminator movie when I
Mm,
was in film school. Um, so so I come to it from a filmmaking perspective. I'm not like a sound engineer. I don't have. I wish I did. I would love to have had more of a technical background in the engineering side of sound. That would have helped me. But I do think part of what I offer is being a filmmaker. I have a more filmic approach to sound, or maybe I'm a little more adept at speaking the language of filmmakers and translating that into what that would be for sound. But what happened was I came to LA to attend USC Film School. And like I said, I had a little bit of a sound background, having worked at some radio stations and DJing and live music performance. And at USC, um, I also thought I'm going to learn some other skills besides being a writer, director, auteur, because I'd like to be able to eat and maybe someday buy a home and have an actual skill beyond just walking around with my scripts begging for money.
mm,
And USC, I don't know if they still do this, but it was very smart. They required that you crew on someone else's film before you could apply to make your own.
mm,
Uh, so I at that point I was actually thinking I was going to try to find one of the films and I wanted to try my hand at picture editing and be the picture editor on a film. But I then decided I was like, you know what, I want to work on the best film that's being made this semester. So I read the scripts for all of the ones that were up, and one of them was clearly, I thought, the best of the bunch. So I went and talked to the director of that one, and he said, "Oh, I already have a picture editor, but I need a sound editor. Do you want to do sound on it?" And having done a lot of sound work in the past, I was like, "Yeah, I think I'd be good at that." So I signed up on his film to do sound, which in the film school world was production and post production. So on set with a Nagra, holding the boom up all day, doing that whole thing, and then doing the post sound as well. And fortunately, or that semester, we had a guest professor of sound who was on hiatus. His name was Roger. His name is Roger Party. He's now the head of the LMU sound department here in LA. And he had just come off a string of like Waterworld and Last Action Hero and these big films doing sound effects for him. And he just needed a breather because those can be like 18-hour days,
mm,
7 days a week. And I mean, he knows sound inside and out. So we had someone who was just fresh off of working on some of the biggest films in the world come in and handle the sound for 1 year at USC. And so he was my mentor when I did the sound on this film. And I guess I chose well because the film won the bronze, third place at the Academy Awards for Best Student Film.
mm.
It was a really cool film. It starred a guy named Matt Winston, who, if you're familiar with who Stan Winston is, the visual effects superstar. This was his son.
Mm.
It was a great film, Mr. October, romantic comedy. But when the film was over and we were finished with the mix, Roger said, "You're really good at this. You should do more sound work." And so I applied and I got a TA-ship in the sound department at USC. And before I graduated, I was getting paid offers to do sound work. So I was looking at my friends who were wanting to be cinematographers and picture editors, and they were still working for free on student projects. And I had guys coming to me with, $2,000 cash offers to do the sound on, and I was like, this is this is pretty good. And I think because I had the filmmaking and some audio background experience, that kind of gave me a head start on knowing how to use sound in films. And Roger helped me get an entry level position at a company where I worked as what's called a loader, who loads the sound for the editors. And almost 5 years to the day from when I had my first union day as a loader, I had accepted my first supervising job and had gone from editing to supervising. And then for the next 10 years, I kind of went back and forth between editing and supervising. And now I mostly just supervise. Which isn't to say I won't edit again if the right thing comes along, but more often than not, people are looking at me as a supervisor now, not as an editor. So that's kind of, that's what, I always tell people, have plans, know what you want to do, and then be prepared, and then be open for new opportunities that come along. The plan wasn't to be a full-time sound editor when I moved to LA. But that being said, it's opened a lot of doors for me. I've made a lot of good friends, a lot of good connections. I've got to work on a ton of great stuff and had a very lucrative and fun career. And it allows me to still make my films, when I have downtime between shows and things that I'm working on.
That's great. There's always the film industry is so big. There's always like a role or position that, because when you went to film school, you went in wanting to be a writer, director, sound editor wasn't something you thought you'd be doing ever.
I don't think I even realized you could have a career. You
Yeah.
don't think about that. This is, and I remember I'm a little bit older than you, so this is pre-internet days where you could learn all this stuff, and that's kind of why I came to LA to go to USC, just to learn, you know,
Hmm.
the thing. But I grew up as seeing myself as a writer, so I was like, I'm a writer, and then I kind of made some films when I was in middle school and high school, just went on with my friends. First film I made was called The Pen Is Mightier, and it was about a serial killer who kills people with ballpoint pens. Um, that I made with my friends. And that was pretty good for being 15 or whatever I was.
Yeah.
Um, so I came to LA to try to make my own films, and I still get to make my own films. So it isn't like I'm not, part of it is having success like this has allowed me the opportunity to do other projects. It's like you don't have to, the things you're passionate about don't necessarily have to be the things that you know how you make your money, right? For some people, the thing they're passionate about is also how they make the money. For other people, they do something that makes them money, and then they get to do their passion project side. I kind of get to do both. I'm passionate about sound, and I get to do that, and it then provides me an outlet every so often to do my own thing where I'm the boss, and, and I get to decide how everything's going, how it's all going to go. So I have a friend, his day job, he can care less about. He DJs on the weekends, and DJing is his life. And it's like he's super happy, and I'm like, that's how I wish everybody could figure that out, like that balance, that life balance of
Mm.
who you are doesn't have to be tied to your job. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. In my case, it's kind of both. I'm kind of trying to have the best of both worlds. I guess I'm greedy, but it's fun. And the other great thing about being on the sound side is you do so much work and you can manipulate people, and they don't have any clue that you're doing it.
Yeah.
Which is fun. It's fun adding the
Balance.
little Easter eggs.
Mm. Balance is key, as
There's
Miyagi would say.
Hollywood is no different than any other place. I mean, yes, it's more public, and people write more articles about maybe what you're working on and what you're doing, but you're right. Life work balance and having having the right attitude of knowing that the stress of work doesn't have to follow you home.
Mm.
And it's a very stressful business because there's a lot of money and you're working very fast, and it's a gig based economy, right? There's no guarantee that the show will come back. There's no guarantee that even if you do your best work, that the show will come back. You know, the actors can be amazing, the sound can be amazing, everything about the show can be amazing, but if people don't watch it, it doesn't come back, and then you're out of work, right? So it can be tough sometimes having to constantly be generating the next thing, but then you get to do things like go to the season 5 premiere where there's like 1,000 fans sitting behind you on this open. I don't know if you saw any video or
Yeah.
anything about that. Um, it was the best premiere I've ever been to because the fans were there.
Wow.
And so they had, obviously they had the red carpet where the actors and the John Josh and Hayden and them came up, and then they had a little area for all the people who worked on the show to sit. So all of us, all the editors and post people and anybody from production who was able to get to LA for it, where we were sitting. But then they allowed several hundred fans to come, like the diehard fans. And so sitting there watching the first 2 episodes, which you've worked on, and you've laughed and you've cheered, but just the people who work on it, and now suddenly there's hundreds of people behind you just eating it up, and you're seeing how much they're getting what you've been a part of. I mean, it's the greatest feeling in the world to see people laugh and cry and cheer for something that you were a part of and helped to make. It's pretty magical.
Yeah, hopefully they do that again for season 6. That would be pretty fun.
That would be great because, the show blew up during the pandemic. So season 3 and 4 were produced and, and aired at the height of the isolation of, and I think that's part of why the show connected, because the show's about the show's about people connecting, right? The show's about, this crusty guy who's had a hard knock life, who meets a kid who we find out is kind of similar to where he was, right? And so what path is he going to lead him down? Is he going to go full kreese, or is he going to have learned, and, will he ever listen to Daniel once ever in his life? I think that resonated with people when they were all trapped during the pandemic. Plus, it's a show you can watch with your kids, but it's not a kid show that would bore you, you know. So it really blew up. So that was the premiere of 5 was the first time that we got to, have, or I guess Netflix was able to do something like that and include the fans, and it was really cool. So I hope there'll be more of those in the future. Just from a purely selfish standpoint, it's really cool to, for part of it, I wasn't even watching the show. For parts of it, I kind of pivoted. I was just, when I knew some of the cool moments were coming up, I kind of pivoted just to watch the people, the true fans, to see their reactions to
Yeah.
the cool moments.
Do you ever go on YouTube and see, like, I mean, I posted my reactions to certain things.
I haven't, because I don't ever think about that. I probably should. I bet that would be, I should probably go watch them. I'm curious to see. I'd be curious to see how people react, if they react the same way. I'm a fan. When the episode comes in, I'm like watching it, going, "Oh, what?" Because the thing is, I keep. If there's a sound reason for it, I usually, when it's a new show, I have to read the scripts and I have to kind of get prepared because I got to know what the show's about. But once the show's going, I don't read the scripts ahead of time. I get mad when John, Josh, and Hayden Mallory are talking and they spoil something for me. Because, well, as a fan, but the reason I don't is as the sound supervisor, a big thing, and there's debates about it, I'm sure you've heard this, like not being able to understand what the people are saying, right? Not being able to hear the words. And so when I first watch an episode, I'm watching it clean so that I can flag which lines were hard to hear and which lines weren't. If I've already read the script, it can help you. Like if you already know what they're going to say, it makes it easier to understand them. Versus if I don't know what they're going to say, if there's a line that's where there's too much noise on it, or they kind of fumble the words a little bit or something like that, I can catch that. So I don't usually. So the first time I'm watching it, I'm trying to get that fresh, like what lines are problematic here. But it also then allows me to just enjoy the show. And with Cobra Kai, a couple times, I've just stopped jotting down notes, and I've just been like, "Oh man, I just got to watch this and see what happens. Where's this going?"
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, because also, I mean, you're listening to the same stuff over and over, does it ever become a point where it's like maybe something is like maybe something's good, but like you're listening to it over and over, and because you're listening to it over and over, it kind of affects you. You have to like take a step back. Has that ever happened?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's a in the sound we always laugh about it. There's always this. It always happens. We'll There'll be a line and there's like noise on it or something, right? And I'm like, oh, we can't use that. So I'm like, let's go to the other takes and see if we can find one that's clean. And so we'll go through all the other takes and we'll realize that the take they used was the only take where the actor said the words in that order or that way.
Mm.
And so what happened was the actor says, I hate you. Take one. I hate you. Take two. Take three. I hate you. They say I hate you like the same way. And then in one take they go, man, I really hate you. I hate you so much. And then they use that take. And I was like, I think they used that take because that was the one that was different and fresh and it like stood out to them. So we're always joking that every time we're like, got to find an alt. Like, I bet this was the take where they said it different. And then we're like, sure enough, there's no other takes. They picked that take because it was the interesting, unique, fresh take. So definitely you have to sometimes be careful of that. So on the sound side, it's more making sure that we're not familiar with what we're hearing from repetition and making sure that the first time someone hears something, often it's a dialogue, but it can be sound effects and sound design. Like, if it's the first time you're hearing it, is it getting across the information? And that's part of why we have multiple playbacks and different people come at different points in the process. And, we have people who come in for the final playback who haven't heard the mix before just to get that fresh perspective. Because at that point, on the mix stage, by the time we play it back for the final executives, we've already done 4 full playbacks, right? So we kind of have heard the final mix several times. So getting that fresh perspective can be helpful.
Mm. And on a show like Cobra Kai, like, I mean, there's tons of audio, tons of sounds to sort through. How do you organize all of it so it's easy to access and edit?
Well, that's part of what good editors do. Editing is not just creatively finding sounds, creatively solving dialogue. It's also delivering well-organized tracks to the stage to speed up the mixer. The thing we're always fighting is time. I talked to you about how quickly we have to go. And, time is money and money is time, right? If we go over, then we're in overtime. And then that costs the client money, which no one likes, right? No one likes to have to pay more than what they were expecting. So we have to move very quickly. And part of that is being organized. Simple things like sound effects are usually banked in blocks of 8 tracks. And why 8 tracks? Because when you're mixing, thumbs can't reach, but you've got, you've got the 8 fingers here. So a sound of the mixer can put his fingers or her fingers
Mm.
on 8 tracks at a time. So you want to keep all of so if you have the punches, you don't want a punch to have, track 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, because now, they're not, the boards are in banks of 8 because 8. So you want to keep everything within 1 through 8 or 9 through 16 or 17 through 24 so that the mixer can in one pass have their fingers on everything and go more quickly. If they have to then switch to another bank and go again, now you've just doubled the amount of time that it's going to take them to prep that sound. And that, little things like that, having everything in banks 8 for sound effects, or the organization of the dialogue tracks such that it's very easy to figure out where the alts are, and having the proper things muted and unmuted, so that the, kind of pre-setting levels so that you don't have one line of dialogue is super loud and the next one's super quiet. And now the mixer has to spend a lot of time balancing it, kind of pre-doing some of that work on the editorial stage at that level speeds up the process. And that's, I always say what we do at the highest level here, as union editors, it's not that what we do is better than what anybody else can do, but a lot of it is how quickly we can get it to that best level of quality. and that comes from experience. If I see a line of dialogue that's noisy, I know right away the best solution to try to fix it, and then the second, third, fourth, and I will do them in that order till I fix it. Versus someone who's never cut dialogue before will just start trying things and they don't know yet, and it might
Mhm.
take them an hour to figure out the best way to fix that problem. Whereas I knew right away what the best solution was, and I do that first. So that speed is kind of what we're getting paid for, being able to do it that quickly. Same on set, the guys who do the lighting on sets are amazing. If you say you want the light to hit a certain way, they will set up a flag on a stand like down by where they are and angle it and stuff, and then they'll lift it and it lifts right into position, and they're not like lifting it and then bringing it back down and adjusting and then lifting it again. They angle it, they lift it, it's set, they walk away.
Mm.
That's the speed that you need to get this done, and that's what we're getting paid to do. But you're absolutely right. With that many tracks, organization is very important, and communicating and making sure the editor is talking to the mixer and the mixer is talking to the editor on the same page. And every mixer likes their tracks in a different way, so also part of it is communicating and figuring out how do they like to work their tracks and how do they like to organize their tracks. There's no one right way, so what's the way that works best for them?
Yeah, so you mentioned like now you've done it so much that like it when there's a certain situation like like okay, I could try this, but how long did it take for you to get to that level from first starting in sound? How like was it years? Like how long till now you're really comfortable with it? And are you still
Mm,
learning?
I'm still learning, and then new tools and new technology comes along. So now we have, in the last 5 years, there's been an explosion of digital tools that will analyze sounds and can digitally remove things that in the past we couldn't get rid of. The flip side to it, though, is having that knowledge of how to do it without the digital is knowing when the digital solution's the best and when it's not, because sometimes you can overuse those digital tools. And I'm hearing it more and more when I watch TV. And like I said, I try to be a fan, and I try not to pay attention to the sound. So I'm kind of just like you. If it's a good sound, then I don't have to worry about it, and I can be a fan. But every once in a while, now I'm hearing stuff, and I'm like, ooh, they pushed it too far. I'm hearing digital artifacting, and I'm hearing this artificial. It becomes there's an artificial sound that comes about in tracks that have been digitally manipulated too much. That being said, that technology keeps getting better and better and better, and this whole AI thing, of course, is very scary
Oh,
for the future and what AI can do for that kind of stuff. And that's part of what the WGA and SAG, I think, are negotiating right now, is things like are you allowed to just have AI revoice a character, and not have an actor do it, right? Because you could just have AI do the performance. And
wow,
what
that's
if you
crazy.
if you need new dialogue for a scene? Do you have to hire a writer, or can you just have Chat GPT write new dialogue for your character, right? In my case, can you get rid of the sound editor and just have an automated AI plugin just clean up all the sound and cut the new tracks and cut people out of the process, right? That's the scary thing, replacing people with machines. But to go back to your question, I would say I felt pretty after about 3 years total. So I learned what I learned in school, and as with most things, what you learn in school gives you a foundation, but it's the real world experience that that matters the most. You know, if I needed a lawyer, I don't know. You know, do I want the lawyer that's just out of law school but never actually trialed a case? Or do I want the lawyer who's done cases of this nature 100 times, right?
Mhm.
And that's kind of what you're paying for, right? Like you have to pay more for the lawyer who's done it 100 times versus a lawyer who's just out of law school. And it's kind of the same thing with sound work. Um, if if you have the money to go union, you do, because you don't become a union editor unless you've put in the hours um, of learning. But I would say I was a loader assistant for 1 year, and I spent that year constantly sitting over the shoulder of editors. They probably hated me by the end of that year because I would constantly ask if I could sit in and watch them work. And then I would try not to ask them questions and just watch what they're doing. But invariably, I'd be like, "Why'd you do that?" And then I'd be slowing them down because they'd have to stop and explain it to me. But luckily, I worked with some really nice people. Um, but I would say it was 3 years total. 1 year as an assistant, and then I started cutting, and I feel like after that second year, um, I did at that was the point where I worked on a thing, a sci-fi movie, Dune. There's a new Dune coming out, but this was the Dune miniseries that was on the Sci-Fi Channel.
Mhm.
So not the Lynch one and not the new one, but the middle one. Um, and that was the first kind of big thing I worked on. And that was where some of the other editors took notice of what I was doing and were like, "Wow, yeah, he knows. Good work. That was good work. You know what you're doing." And so 3 years is where I felt like, okay, now I'm pretty good. And then I would say on the supervising thing, I would say actually it was like 5 or 6 years of supervising before I really felt like I was like a solid supervisor. Supervising is so much more communication and a broader range of things you're dealing with, because you're dealing with the dialogue and the sound effects and the ADR and budget and, dealing with actors. Like there's so many other facets to it that I think it took longer to kind of feel like I have a grasp on all of them.
Yeah, and everyone out there, I'm not. Maybe some people know, maybe some people don't. Cobra Kai was nominated for 2 Emmy awards, so for sound editing. So, what was it like
Yeah.
finding that out, and what does that mean to you personally?
Well, I'm really proud of this. So I put my my bio says 9-time Emmy loser because I've been nominated for 9 Emmys and I've yet to win. Uh, so maybe someday, maybe I'll get a lifetime achievement award at the end or something. I don't know.
There you go.
But Cobra Kai were my first nominations where I was the supervisor. The other seven were as an editor. So I was very proud of those. They were really cool. One of them was that Dune. One of my early, I think it was my second Emmy nomination or third, was that Dune um, miniseries. But those were as editors, and so Cobra Kai was the first Emmy nomination as a supervisor, where you know I'm not being recognized for just being doing my one job really well, but being recognized for helping a large group of people do their job really well, and helping you know my first rule of thumb is always hire someone better than you at the other jobs. So I like to say that the sound effects editor is a way better sound effects editor than I am, and the Foley team is way better at Foley than I am. you know I might have to argue about the dialogue because that's what I did back in the day. I don't know. We'll see. Definitely, the dialogue editor is better at using the modern tools, since I haven't cut in a couple of years.
Mhm.
These new digital tools that have come out. But the goal is to get people who are better than you, and then help them do their job even better, right? So give them the support they need to do work so good that it gets nominated for an Emmy. So it was really cool. The first time, I'm trying to remember. I don't remember how I found out the first Emmy nomination, because that was we were still kind of back in the deep in the pandemic, and I honestly don't remember. But last year, the second one was really funny because now I had done, after you get nominated once, then you get put on panels, and you get to do some presentations. We did a for your consideration 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago,
Mm.
um, where they invited me because it had been nominated. So it was the big three, and it was Ralph, and it was Billy, and it was the stunt team because they got nominated, and it was me representing sound. So very rarely do you have, sound on these fancy panels, So it was I'm really grateful that Netflix and the Academy and John Josh and them supported having sound be a part of this panel, because usually you don't see anything. What's called below the line. So above the line would be your writers, directors, actors, producers. Below the line are DP, camera grip, editing, sound editing, colorist, all that kind of stuff. So that was all really cool. But so for the second one, they announced it like really early, so that East Coast, it's still early on the East Coast. So I think it's like 7 a.m. local time.
Mm.
So I go on the website. I missed when they do the live announcement, they just announce like the big categories, because the Emmys has a ton of categories, right? Like it would be 4 hours of just listing all the nominations. So they do the announcements of the big ones, and then they just release everything on their website. So I was actually working at, I have like an elliptical in the garage, and try to get in. When you sit in front of a computer all day, you got to really force yourself to be active
Mhm.
and healthy. So I'm on there working out, and it's like, okay, they've announced it. So I go on I have my iPad there, and I go on the thing, and I scroll down to best sound editing in a half-hour program, and it lists 4 shows, and Cobra Kai wasn't one of them. And I was like, well, it was like Barry, What We Do in the Shadows. I'm blanking on the other ones. And then there was a blank spot. And I
Mm.
was like, wow, usually there's 5 in the category and they only nominated 4. And I was like, that was my only thing was like, I was like, I get it. There's a lot of great shows. So I get, and it's art, right? Awards are very subjective in that, like, how can there be one that has the best sound? Like, there isn't
Mhm.
really one that has the best sound, right? There's one that has really, really great sound that we voted for, at the exclusion of 40 other shows that also had great sound. I was like, if I had my way, there'd be 50 nominees and 10 winners, right? Because there's
Yeah.
just, how do you pick one, right? So it's cliched, but even being nominated, I feel, is a great honor, because you're still leaving out a ton of shows that sound great. So I totally get that maybe Cobra Kai wasn't, what didn't, this wasn't our year to get a thing. But I was like, but only nominating 4? Like, come on, give us 5, right? So I was kind of like, that was my beef with it.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh well. So then I go back to working out, and then I start getting ding ding messages on my on my phone, right? And people are like, congratulations, congratulations, and I'm like, what? So I go back to the page, and I go back again, and I realized that they had accidentally, the Cobra Kai logo, they had done it in black, and the little square that it was
Mm.
on was black.
Oh
So
my
they had
god.
screwed up, and it was the blank square that was just an empty black square was actually Cobra Kai, but they had screwed up the logo with the
Wow.
wrong color. And so when I scrolled to, like, just the listing, the graph, just the listing of by name, it was there. It was just the graphic uh, had been screwed up, and so
Oh
I was
my
like,
god.
oh, okay, like, whew, feel
Wow.
much better now. But again, it would have been fine if we weren't one of the 5, but at least there were 5 nominees, and grateful that we were one of them.
Wow. Of course, it's like kind of that, like, it's kind of like a movie moment. It's it's kind of like in Cobra Kai when when the Cobra Kai dojo got accepted into the Sekai Taikai, and the Miyagi Fang is like, oh man, we didn't get accepted. It's like, wait, you guys are
Yeah,
accepted too. It's like you had that moment where it's like
I
you didn't win, but then you really did get that nomination.
yeah, I got to experience the graciousness of going, well, not our year.
Yeah.
That's okay. And then 5 minutes later going, oh wait, it is our year. Thank you very much. That was nice. And then Barry, those Barry guys, and I know the Barry guys, so I love the Barry guys. Fun fact: uh, there are 2 people in Hollywood who are from Guam who work in sound, and one of them is me doing Cobra Kai, and the other is Teddy Salas, who's one of the mixers on Barry.
Oh,
So
cool.
I mean, he does other shows as well, but Barry and Cobra Kai, the 2 shows currently that got Guam guys doing the sound.
Mm. So now someone
So
else
there's your trivia.
so if someone else from Guam comes in, gets an Emmy nomination, it's gonna add to
Yeah,
that.
Teddy and I haven't won yet, so yeah, if someone else sneaks in under the wire and becomes the first winner, good for them. And there might actually, I say that, there might be some other people from. I mean, I don't know everybody in town from Guam, so there could be other people that I don't know of. But it's Teddy and I, are, as far as I know, are the only ones that I know of.
Mm, got it.
But yeah, Barry won last year, so Barry, that's a good show. It's a good show. Like I said, how can you get mad? Like Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso, we're always, Cobra Kai and Ted Lasso are always going at it in the awards, and I'm like, I love Ted Lasso. I love Ted Lasso, so I can't be mad.
Yeah. Season 6.
But if it was a karate showdown, we know
Oh.
who would win.
Oh, definitely,
No,
definitely.
no question about it. No question about it.
Ted Lasso would come into the dojo.
Johnny would just beat his ass. he would just he'd be like, "What's that thing on your face? Is that a mustache?" And then he'd just lay into him.
Literally, that was from season one. What the hell's that thing on your face? It's a mustache.
Yeah, exactly. And he'd be like, you know, football is played with helmets with a pointy ball.
Oh man. So I do want to ask you, let's say you could be in the Miyagi verse and you could play any character on Cobra Kai.
Oh
Who
boy,
would you play and why?
well, that's a tough question. It's a tough question. Well, I mean, the obvious answer is Bert because everybody loves Bert.
Yes.
Um, one of the, I mean, we didn't get a lot of time to talk about what I love about Cobra Kai. One of the things I love about Cobra Kai is the fact that they have given a lot of the background performers on the show a chance to shine,
Mm,
and there's a consistency there, and that some of the actors who were originally just filling in, you need more people in the dojo, right? People in the background have become beloved characters that the fans love, and they made a point. You notice at the end of season 5, they made a point of giving some of them lines, some of them who have never had a line on screen
yeah.
ever. They gave them a chance to have a little moment, which I think was awesome. Just a reward for the professionalism, because that's not easy. You're standing back there, but you have to hit your marks time, and you have to be consistent, because that's about consistency. It's about crossing at the same time every take, and standing in the right place every take, and having the right body language every take, because you're in that background and they're cutting from different angles, and the actors who are in the foreground get to do stuff, but you just have to be there and be the glue that makes the scene look realistic. And then no one ever knows you and anything about you, and so they've given some of those people a chance to shine. But boy, I'm trying to think who I would be. um I mean, I wouldn't mind being Tanner. I mean, Robbie, because being that fit and just like 0% body fat,
The
and that hair, that would be,
hair, yeah.
um, the hair would be good. I'm trying to think, boy, I'm trying to pick someone who wouldn't be the obvious answer. I mean, there's no question that the character that I relate to, the one that would probably, like, the character that was me at that age, I would be Miguel, because I
Mm,
was kind of the sweet, awkward, well-meaning kid who occasionally, you know, got in trouble, but always like tried to do the right thing.
mm.
So I'd be Miguel. The only difference is that when I showed up for karate training, I wouldn't, after a year, be a champion. I'd still I'd I'd still suck at it and still probably get beat up. But
Yeah, it's like all
I'll
these.
be
Oh, sorry, what?
I just say Miguel's heart is always in the right place. And I mean, I'd like to say I'm Johnny, but I'm definitely not Johnny, because I'm not that cool. I'm not as cool. I'm not as cool as Billy, but I could be Miguel, the one who always means to do right.
That's funny because I always say, like, I'd love to be in the Cobra Kai dojo, but I know I'm probably suited for Miyagi-Do. I don't know if I can handle Cobra Kai, which
Yeah.
which leads me into my question. In real life, are you a Cobra Kai, Miyagi-Do, or Eagle Fang? Which dojo would you join?
Oh, I have an Eagle Fang headband, so I'm definitely
Oh,
I'm
okay.
definitely Eagle Fang. I definitely, in my college days, I was in the Misfit fraternity. I'm definitely an Eagle Fang. Lovable losers. That's you know
The
that's the
underdogs.
yeah, underdogs, and like not get in a little bit of trouble, but always well intentioned, even when you do it. You know,
Mm.
that would probably be. Honestly, actually, I was like actually thinking about it. Actually, in real life, I'm probably thinking back. I was probably Dimitri. Actually, Dimitri is probably who I was, because you know I was doing sound, and I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, and so I was probably I was probably Dimitri,
You
to be
weren't
honest.
hacking into surveillance cameras and
No, but that's yeah. See, I can't be
doing
him because
that
I
sort
also
of
don't know. I'm not good. I'm not
thing.
good at like computers and tech stuff like that either. So I don't know. See, there's no poet. There's no writer poet type characters on this show. Um, but that's what's great. I mean, I think the great thing about the show is there's you can relate even quote I don't want to say villains or bad guys, but even the people who sometimes we're cheering against, like TORY, right? Like we can all relate to what TORY is going through and the pressures that she was facing and what led her to make bad decisions. And I
Yeah.
mean, Robbie's gone like
Oof.
full circle 4 times. You know what I mean? Like he's really a great character with complexities to him, right? Had a lousy dad who has only later in life come around to recognizing how bad he was and is trying to do the right thing. I think the show really hit its stride, and I think it was it episode 6 of season 1. It was the episode where you'll probably know better, where they're at the little diner and Johnny's talking to Miguel about Robbie and about how he
Uh,
failed him as a father. And I'm like, that's I think where the story, because it was funny, but that was the point where it had its heart, and you saw what Johnny's arc was going to be. And I think it's also the moment where Billy really stretched his actor muscles and got to
mhm.
like, in the movie, Johnny was a villains are often caricatures, right? Like they don't have depth because you're not with them to get any depth, right? They're just there to be obstacles that Daniel has to overcome, right? And that was the point I think where they were headed that direction, where Johnny became a real human being who had his own struggles and issues, and now we could identify with him fully, and he wasn't just being funny, putting the TV on the wrong wall and being like a bad handyman and not knowing what the internet was or even how to work a smartphone. That was the point where he became a real human character. And it's one of my favorite like small moments in the show. We all have the big moments are always awesome, but for me, some of the little moments are even that much more. I think important to the show and the success of the show and just the quality of the show.
2 characters talking. That's all you need
Yep.
for those great
Oh
scenes.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, what is the biggest lesson you've learned from working on Cobra Kai and working in the film industry as a whole?
Well, I kind of touched on it before. The biggest thing I've learned is the human connection, the importance of working with people. Life's too short to 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 work with people you don't like, and life's too short to be antagonistic and create situations where someone might not like you. Um, Trusting people, giving them the tools and the knowledge, and then the space to succeed. Again, the thing I love about supervising is my job is in a way to make the editors like make them rock stars, right? Make them do amazing work. And the same with the mixers are kind of the rock stars of the stage, right? I always call them they're the gatekeepers of taste, right? They take all these tracks, but they're the ones who determine what actually plays and what balance. And so providing the material in an organized way such that they can also get acclaim and recognition. You know, when teams I work with are nominated for best mixing, they fully did the work and deserve it. But I also am very proud because I gave them the platform of material which they then molded to create that award.
Mm,
So even though I'm not a part of that, and I shouldn't be a part of that nomination or those wins, when the people that I'm helping win, and then of course, especially when Cobra Kai gets nominated for awards and wins awards, like they won the best action series and stuff. I'm only one small piece of a huge number of people who work on it, but I take great pride in the fact that I made sure that sound pushed it forward and didn't pull it back. And that's a lesson I think that will work in whatever you do. Whether you're working in film and TV, if you're a doctor, a lawyer, if you're a school teacher, right? Um, Teachers are, I think, are in some ways, I think similar to supervisors in the regard that I think of myself as a supervisor, is that a teacher's job is to provide students with what they need to excel. And when a student succeeds, that's the recognition of the teacher having done a good job. And I think that, you know, I think people who are successful, whatever they do, have that, you know, that idea of, you know, what they say, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? Like it's not just your own personal success, but when the people who are working with you are successful, that reflects well on you and I think makes for a good work environment when you don't have people who are trying to step over you, but instead trying to lift you up with them. Very cliched, but and in this business especially, because again, you know, I've never been hired on a resume or a piece of paper, or you know, I think I'm sure people have clicked on my IMDb just to see what my credits are, but I've never been hired just because someone looked at my IMDb page, right?
Mm.
More often than not, they've asked around. I got a job. I did a TV pilot, and I got hired because 3 supervisors were put up for the position, and they scheduled interviews, and then they canceled the interviews. And I thought, well, I didn't get it because they canceled my interview. And then the next day they called me and said, okay, we want you to supervise it. I was like, oh. What happened was the post producer called a friend of his and said, do you know any of these 3 supervisors? And he said, no. But he goes, but my wife, his wife is there, and his wife works in the business. So she goes, oh, I love Patrick. I've worked with Patrick. He's
Mm.
great. That was it. He was like, I don't know any of these 3 guys, and I can interview them, but let me call around and see if any of the people I trust have worked with these people. And the one name that popped out, just luck of the draw, right? But it was
Yeah.
the one person that got, whose name was like, oh yeah, you want to work with him, was me. That's how this town works, and not that that's the way it should work everywhere in the world, but it's an important thing to remember that people are what matters most at the end of the day. You know, I'd much rather work on a show where everybody gets along and supports each other, even if it's not a huge giant hit that everybody loves, than work on a huge hit that was just drained my soul and no one was happy. And you know what I mean?
Mhm.
I'd rather have a good work environment than a huge hit. Luckily, in the case of Cobra Kai, you get both. That's what's special about Cobra Kai. And I think even the show Cobra Kai reflects how the work environment is, which is there's conflicts and stuff, and obviously it's you know, it's a show where there's a lot of fights. But at the end of the day, it's really about family, right? It's a show about family. That's why I think families like it, right? It's about 2 guys who had different success levels initially with their family, and now are having, you know, we're kind of seeing like a turn, right? Where suddenly Johnny's like the better dad, and Daniel starts kind of having problems, right? Like, it's a show about family, which I think is, and when you're doing film and TV, you are kind of a family because you're working so closely together for so long.
Yeah. And do you have any advice if anybody out there wants to get into filmmaking or sound editing? Do you have any advice for them?
And, you know, it's one of those things where if there was a surefire, true way to do it, I would just set up a seminar and make $1 gazillion telling you, here's the secret. You know, so in my case, you know, the thing that got me in the door was a student film, right? Like, like I didn't know that was going to be the thing that got me in. I would say the first thing is if you're looking to do film and television, the first thing is now you have the technology in your pocket, right? I mean, I would have killed for a smartphone when I was 15. The fact that you can shoot 4K video in 24 frames per second on your phone, and then edit it on your
It's
phone, and
crazy.
then go online and get all the music and sound effects you could possibly need and cut it together. Like the first thing is, you know, film school is great. I don't want to knock film school at all. And you learn a lot there. And just going to school in general is a great kind of transitionary period from being at home and to being on your own and making your own decisions, and but with a little bit of guidance and support. So it's like a nice transitional. But like, make your own films. You don't have to wait to go to school or anything like that. And there's a gazillion videos on YouTube. Just remember that everybody on YouTube is not necessarily an expert, right? Like, if they're on YouTube but they're not actually making any films on their own, but they said they're going to tell you how to make films, you know, if they're not making their own films, there might, you know, don't take all of their advice as like, you know, the rule of as law of the land. Um,
Mhm.
but you can make your own films, and then the other thing is you gotta, you know, you have to network, you have to work with other people, you have to collaborate, you have to be willing to not be the boss on every project, working for other people on their films in other capacities, even if you don't end up becoming a sound editor or a picture editor, just working on other people's projects is great and helps you learn the process. And then always do your best work. This student film, I could have just, it was a student film. You know, I don't even remember if I was being graded on it. Like, I could have just kind of done the bare minimum just to fulfill the requirement, right? I could have just shown up, done what was asked of me, the minimum necessary in order then the next semester submit my own film that I was going to write and direct, right? Like there was nothing that said I had to go all out and do the very best I could. But I did, and that caught the eye of someone who took me under their wing. And then when I got the job as an assistant for that year, I did the very best I could. And I was asking questions and I was helping out when they had freebie projects come in. I cut them and then got feedback and did the very best work I could. And so I went from arriving in LA, not knowing a single person in this town. My wife and I moved here. We didn't know anybody in this town at all. I'd only ever, I don't even know, I think I had spent one night in LA passing through and maybe going to Disneyland at some point, but I'd never,
Mhm.
you know, I went from that. And 4 years later, I was a union sound editor working on a hit NBC TV show.
Wow.
And that wasn't the plan. Like that wasn't my goal. But I also made sure to work, make sure everything I did and put my name on was the best it could be, because you don't know what's the thing that's going to catch someone's eye and lead to opportunities. So be collaborative, you know, make projects on your own and do all the facets of it. Don't be afraid to make a lousy film, because that lousy film might teach you the lessons that will then make you a huge success down the road. And then when you do work for other people, always do your best work no matter what size project it is, because you never know which one's going to lead to the next step, which then leads to the next step, which then leads to the next step. And then if you can get to some place where there's a lot of work being done, it's still easier to get in when you're there in person versus remote. Nowadays, once you're established, you can now work remote a lot more, but it is still easier to be someplace where. But if you're someplace where there's not, find people, create your own network wherever you are, and you know you can start that way too. You know, there are some very vibrant filmmaking hubs now that weren't 20 years ago, and it's because people just got together and started making cool stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that advice. That was a lot of really good stuff that, I do films myself, and that
Yeah,
advice speaks to me. It's definitely, collaboration, trial and error. And yeah, I think your journey is really incredible, and it shows. I think there's a lot of people out there, possibly some people watching this interview right now, who will see this, will see your story, and uh, see that it's possible that you could do it.
good. And remember, when you do become super successful, make sure to hire me, because I inspired you to keep going.
Yes.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
no, that's hey. On my film, I had a film where I had, someone was a PA on my film that I made, and then 12 years later, she was the post supervisor on a TV show, and I filled in, and I was basically working for her, you know,
Wow.
as her sound editor, right?
Yeah.
You know, be nice to everybody. Uh, do good work and be nice, because you never know when that person is going to be in a position that could help you.
Definitely. And I want to thank you so much for joining me for this amazing interview discussion, getting to learn about your craft. I mean, I could hear so much more. I think after season 6, I would love to talk to you again, and because I'm sure that there's a lot there that I mean, you I know they're in early stages of production, so I don't know if you're working on it right now, but
No, I can't. I can't. I was like, I'll be safe in this interview because I can't spoil anything, because I don't know anything about season 6, other than some logistical things. But no, it'll. I mean, obviously, right now there's the writer strike, so that's kind of put everything. So everything is going to probably push. And how much is we don't have any control over. But after season 6 and after Obliterated's out, we can always talk again, and then we can compare and contrast the two shows, and I can tell you sound stories about Obliterated that are very different from Cobra Kai.
Oh, I'd love to hear that. So thank you so much again. And other than Cobra Kai, do you have any projects that you're working on that we can expect? And also, if people want to follow you in your work, like where can they follow you online or on social
Oh,
media?
thank you. Yeah. So I'm on Instagram, but I'm not of that generation. But I am on it. I think my Instagram is at P Patrick Hogan, which is my name, so very easy, at P Patrick Hogan. If you want to see, I've done some short films the last couple years. My personal stuff usually is either kind of quirky drama or sci-fi, because I'm a big sci-fi fan. So I do actually have a website for my little company that I created to make my own films, and it's jhdanger.com. J is in Johnson, H is in Hogan, Danger, because we like to be on the edge, .com. And that actually has the links where you can go to YouTube to see the short films, because the short films are out on YouTube, so you can watch them there.
Mm.
One's a romantic sci-fi, the other's a horror sci-fi, so whichever one you're into. And then the feature film I made is actually being re-released this year, actually, because it was never on streaming. So it's going to be on Tubi and Freevee. It's called Promise Me Tomorrow. It has a couple actors in it you'd probably recognize. And when it goes live, that'll also be on the jhdanger.com website, and of course on Instagram. But it's and then beyond that, I did a show this year called Fire Country, which is on CBS. So if you're in that kind of thing, it's a great show with great people. And then the other show I do that's kind of dear to my heart, like Cobra Kai, is a show called Reservation Dogs. We're about to start the new season of Sound on Reservation Dogs. That's if you haven't seen Reservation Dogs, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It's another show that just has a lot of heart, and it's the first show that was created, written, produced, and stars an all indigenous cast and creative team, which I think is great. So I've been very fortunate to do some really cool shows. And then, of course, there's this little show called Obliterated coming up sometime this fall, I hope. And we mixed the first one. The final mix is the first one's this week.
Mm.
So coming up. So very exciting. So yeah, thank you for letting me share all the things I've been up to. I've been very fortunate on both the sound side and getting to make my own projects. So very happy that anybody would be interested in seeing any of it, or more importantly, listening to any of it. Right.
Yeah, of
So thank you
course.
very much.
Of course. Thank you. And yeah, I'll link everything in the description below, all of Patrick's his website and Instagram and the YouTube. So I'll link that all. And yeah, guys, I highly recommend go on Patrick's IMDb. Like, when I went up and looked at your credits, obviously, I knew you did Cobra Kai, but like there were shows that I've watched. I'm like, oh, it's so cool that you did it, like Glee, Vampire Diaries, Law and Order
Yeah.
SVU. So like that was pretty cool. Like you've done a ton of stuff. So I'm sure like people will like if they go check out what you've done, they'll be like, oh, sick. He did my favorite show, this or this. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, yeah, okay. And the one I've all this stuff. There's only one thing my kids have ever excited about. That was Shrek 3. That was
Shrek
the only
3,
thing that ever got me.
Shrek
Shrek 3 got me mad respect for my kids. The rest of it, they're not. Oh, whatever, Dad. You're not that cool.
3. Hey, Shrek 3. Everybody loves Shrek, so there you go.
Everybody loves Shrek. Universal respect for Shrek.
Yes, definitely. Well, Patrick, thank you again so much for joining me. Thank you to everyone for watching. We'll see you next time on Cobra Kai Kid. And until then,
Cobra Kai never dies.